Dr. Ehrlich, your main concern has been the population bomb, as you call it in your book. What hope is there?
We've got to use political processes. In the not-too-distant future, the government will simply tell you how many children you can have and throw you in jail if you have too many.
I do know that at this time, unless now we think of what America is going to be like in the year 2000, this increase in population, and do something about it to stop that pressure, we're going to reap the whirlwind. Because look at what the year 2000 will be. If the present trends continue, our cities are going to be choked with people, and they will be impossible places in which to live, and the explosions will be even worse.
If we do not, by humane means, limit our numbers, then numbers are going to be limited by more famines and shortages.
The disaster will take the form of famine, plague, or war. They're mankind's old companions, fundamentally. You just got to remember this. There's no way out of the arithmetic. There will never be 7 billion people in the year 2000.
And now a milestone for all of us on this planet today. The United Nations declared that today the world's population reached 7 billion people.
That relentless population clock just keeps on ticking and ticking.
Well, if they kept such a clock in Italy, it would be ticking backwards. The government there thinks there are not enough Italians.
Demographers warn that the shrinking population could drag the country into an unprecedented economic crisis.
Dire predictions of an overpopulated planet have been with us for centuries. What if they're just plain wrong?
Alert! The number of babies born in America last year falling to a 32-year low.
But there is already a population crisis hitting major economies across the globe.
Look at these numbers. How do you explain this decline?
You know, you've got cases like Japan where adult diapers outsell baby diapers.
The world's falling birth rate isn't on the list of major threats to life as we know it, but it soon will be. Taxes are destined to soar, pension systems will become unsustainable, while our healthcare systems won't be able to cope with the ratio of old people to take care of compared to the shrinking number of taxpayers. Businesses will struggle to find workers to hire, school closures will accelerate, while social care will continually be slashed.
And they say it's an economic time bomb.
I'm worried about the birth rate. Most people think we have like too many people on the planet, but actually this is an outdated view. I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. Collapse. I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse.
To be a father. After the breakup, I start everything from zero. That's why I got very personal, very emotional because you know when you first know that your partner didn't want, it's quite heartbreaking. ทีนะพี่หนูไม่ได้แบบหนูไม่ได้เล่าให้ใครฟังเลยว่า
This is my story too. Some saw my husband is a granddad, he is a great, but you see he still enjoy his other life, his drinking and all that.
โอ้พี่ไม่เคยรู้เรื่องเราขนาดนี้ไงโทษทีนะพี่
Why are people having so few children? The more I read about falling birth rates, everything was negative. You enter a downward spiral. As you have fewer and fewer children, you have fewer and fewer future mothers, which in turn goes on and on and on. And no society in history has been known to come out of that spiral.
The speed of population decreasing is going to speed up. And you call it collapse. I agree with
accelerating
that.
collapse. And then a common rebuttal is like, well, what about immigration? Like, from where?
I started the Birthgap project in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2016 after seeing data for Germany showing there are only half the number of children there now compared to 50 years ago.
What are we going to talk about today?
Global population collapse, what else? A fun topic. How's the audio? As a lifelong learner, I had been brushing up my skills on data science. My goal had been to find an explanation to one of the world's great mysteries. Why did the number of children being born in Italy, Japan, and Germany fall so rapidly at the exact same time? Whether data can help answer that question or not, one thing's for certain, with this trend having spread across the entire industrialized world and beyond, we're all going to notice. Due to globalization, a worldwide cascade of shrinking economies will affect all nations, including the US. But it's not just economic issues. Societies with low birth rates are destined to have a burgeoning number of older people to support. Humanity has never faced such a crisis.
For a society with a sizable population to experience continuous and very rapid population decline in a prosperous and peaceful time has never happened in human history. There's no precedence.
Should we be worried about population decline?
Population decline is a form of social change. Can government be a practical substitute for the family structure that we took for granted up until, let's say, like breakfast yesterday morning? That's going to be really hard, I think.
Am I right that people aren't talking enough about this?
In my view, incontestably you're correct. So why aren't they talking about it more? Well, to some degree, maybe people haven't been run over by this problem themselves yet.
Do people talk much about falling birth rates?
I don't think that people talk a lot about this. It's a minor problem, I think.
Are you worried about America's long-term low birth rates?
I don't think it's a terrible thing. Culturally, birth rates have different rising and fallings.
Are people worried about this, about not having children? Do you worry
I
about
don't worry. Do you worry?
No.
We don't worry about these things.
Mm-hmm.
We have other things to worry about.
But is it really a problem? Is it bad for the country? No. Is it bad for workforces? We have robots. We have much more automated work. So why is it a problem?
What people usually don't think about, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but what is unavoidable is massive graying, massive aging of the society. And so all of these places in the world which are under substantial below replacement childbearing for decade after decade are on a trajectory not only for shrinking, but also for really massive population aging.
So you were shocked about hearing about
I was really shocked. The professor told us that, our generation is decreasing, so that we need to protect our older generation. And he showed the statistics. I'm really worrying about Japanese future.
What Germany?
Let's look at Germany. This is the map.
Oh dear. Look at that.
I would not have expected this. I was not aware of this. Not at all. What's the impact of this? Huh?
Understanding population trends can be tricky, partly because it takes decades for changes to play out. Initially, low birth rates are almost undetectable, except to maternity wards, but soon enough, we'll find closing schools, businesses that can't find staff to hire, and then close because they can't find enough customers. And meanwhile, the cost of providing our older generations with healthcare and pensions will continue to rise and rise as more and more people live longer and longer. To understand the scale of the problem, we just need to look at the world's falling fertility rates and how many countries have fallen below the population tipping point. Demographers call this tipping point the replacement level, when women on average are having 2 children that survive into adulthood. Today, 70% of us live in countries below that tipping point, and yet somehow our focus has remained on fears of never-ending population growth.
In the world of statistics, Hans Rosling is a rock and roll star. And in an era where the talk is of rapid population growth, he uses hard data to try to communicate the opposite story. Here's a clip from his film, airing tomorrow night on BBC Two.
Up to 8, and then it goes up to 9, and then it goes here. But see, it's slowing down, it's slowing down. By the end of the century, it's becoming more flat there. And if I do...
No one could explain population trends better than the late Hans Rosling, including why our total headcount will increase for a while, despite the number of children having peaked.
Now, this will confuse you, because how can then the total population grow like this if the children doesn't increase? Where will all these adults come from? And to explain that, I will show you the world population, ladies and gentlemen, in the form of foam blocks. 1 block is 1 billion. We have 2 billion children in the world. Then we have 2 billion between 15 and 30 years of age. We have 1 billion 30 to 45. We have 1 billion 45 to 60. And then we have my block, 60 years and older. We are here on top. Huh? So this is what we have today. Now, what will happen in the future? Do you know what happens to old people like me? They die. The rest, they grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. These ones are now old, time to die. And then these ones grow 15 years older and they have 2 billion children. This one die and the rest grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And without increasing the number of children, without increasing the length of life, we have 3 billion people more by this big inevitable fill-up of adults, which will happen just when the large young generations grow up.
Hans Rosling's building blocks explain beautifully how the world's total population is going to fill up with older people and not children. Yet before this project, I had no idea about low birth rates outside of Europe and Japan.
I would say at the moment, we can break the world down into 2 components if we oversimplify. Sub-Saharan Africa and everybody else. If we take all of the rest of the world, all of non-Sub-Saharan Africa, we're already below the replacement level. And we've been below the replacement level for a little while now.
Barring compensating immigration, no society can survive long-term below this replacement level tipping point. And the farther down birth rates go, the faster they will decay, or to use the correct mathematical term, exponentially decay. Nations like Japan, Italy and Germany, with birth rates around 1.4 children per woman, will decay by around 1/3 per generation, meaning that in 2 generations, the underlying population will fall by over half, and in 3 generations, by 70%. But it turns out, ultra-low birth rates go far beyond these countries.
All, without exception, all industrialized countries, developed countries, have below replacement fertility.
And we know what happens with continuing below replacement fertility. What's working pretty well now, manifestly, is going to be unsustainable a generation from now if you just do the arithmetic.
It's striking, and there is no single explanation. In different contexts, you have very different stories.
But the trend started around the same time in the early 1970s.
Yes, that's amazing, the amazing thing. And in the West, this is attributed to the pill. In Japan, the pill was introduced in the early 1990s.
So it's interesting, though, that while Europe blamed the contraceptive pill for the fall in birth rates,
it's not the case in Japan.
But yet it's falling at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
It's so difficult to describe, and it may be very different things in different places that are causing these changes.
In our culture, it's completely different. Like in Western context, about 1/3 of babies are born out of marriage. But in Japan, marriage and childbearing are closely associated. So it's very different.
And again, there is something strange. In Germany, education is fully subsidized. Completely opposite to Japan, because education in Japan is very expensive. So there are lots of contradictions.
As a statistician looking at raw numbers, if you just look at that coldly, you'd say the probability that there's some common driving factor is very high. Why is it in Japan many people have no children? Why the population is going down? Why women having so few children? Are you worried about there being so few children in Japan now?
He's in a rush. She doesn't know.
She doesn't know.
Yeah.
Samimasen, speak English? Eigo? Okay. Still really don't understand why Japanese people are having only 1.3
Yes,
children.
yes. I don't know. Why?
Well, the weird thing is that many women want to have children, but I don't know why like the current society is struggling with low birth rate.
Young people has maybe losing some expectation for their bright futures, I think. Working long time is a very easy solution. You can so easily escape from such kind of discussions.
We're talking about why in Japan population is going down because people don't get married, people don't have children. Why?
I don't know. It's taxes problem.
Tax problem?
Yes, yes, taxes problem.
I love Steven!
Just from your perspective, first of all, I mean, are you aware that in northern Italy that there is a low birth rate? Is this a surprise to you? Why here?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised about this. Yeah, maybe the people think that they cannot give a good future to the children.
So I think having a career is not easily combinable with children, especially in modern careers where you have flexible work hours, which means no one checks on your hours, but also no one caps your hours, so you can work a lot.
Pourquoi les gens avoir moins d'enfants?
Honnêtement, j'ai aucune idée.
Why? Why is this happening? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe they think that they can live a happy life if they have the children because they have to work just to have a baby, you know?
After 50 years of unsustainably low birth rates, countries in Europe and Japan are fast becoming inverted worlds with too many retirees for the shrinking workforces to support. If we look at Italy, for example, in 2019 there were around 1 million people aged 50 who will be retiring in around 20 years' time. Then, if we look at the number of newborns who, in around 20 years' time, will be entering the workforce to support these retirees, they're less than half. Any large gap between the number of newborns and the number of people they will have to support into retirement is significant socially and economically. Given that these gaps are being caused by long-term low birth rates, I decided to call any shortfall in workers birth gaps. I wanted to show these birth gaps on a series of regional maps. First, I coloured any regions that did have more babies than 50-year-olds green. But in regions where there were too few children being born, I used increasingly dark shades of red, with the darkest red meaning there are less than half the number of babies being born compared to the older people they would need to support. And at the centre of any region with a birth gap, I put a gaping black hole proportional to the drop in the number of children.
Oh wow, it's a big gap.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh.
Gosh, that is major, isn't it?
It's like a shock. It's for me, it's like a shock. What are we making with our future? We are crazy. Yeah? This is not good.
It's clear. It's a very powerful transformation.
But now I want to show you, let's jump to somewhere else.
Deutschland, yeah.
Germany.
Yeah. Auf Wiedersehen. Yep.
Wiedersehen.
While this trend only affected parts of Europe 50 years ago, by the 1990s, birth gaps had spread to every corner of the continent. Even Scandinavia, a region known for its gender equality and parental benefits, wasn't immune. In Denmark, a country that offers 1 year paid leave and free education, the birth gap had reached 30%. There had even been a campaign Do it for Denmark.
Kan sex redde Danmarks fremtid? Danmark har et problem, og der fødes ikke nok børn til at forsørge den aldrende befolkning. Skiftende regeringer har ikke kunne løse problemet, men der må være en løsning. Do it for Denmark.
But it's not only Denmark in this coveted part of the world. In 2019, Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, became the first global leader to address her people on the birthgap crisis.
Norge trenger flere barn. Vi nordmenn får stadig færre barn. For å opprettholde folketallet må hver av oss kvinner få litt mer enn 2 barn i gjennomsnitt. I dag er tallet 1,6. Da blir det relativt sett færre unge som skal bære en stadig tyngre velferdsstat på sine skuldre.
Elementary school teachers across these countries are starting to notice.
The school leaders are talking about less kids coming in the next few years, so obviously we're going to have less classes and less jobs for teachers.
Do you think people should be talking about this more?
I think so, yes. I think so. Because me as a young teacher, I'm not thinking about this, but maybe I should do more.
Some countries like the UK and France, while following this same trend, had smaller birth gaps of less than 20%. But what was most concerning was some of the larger countries in Europe. Some regions of Spain had 50% birth gaps, while parts of Germany and Italy had 60% birth gaps, meaning for every baby being born there will be more than 2 50-year-olds to support into retirement. In 2016, the Italian government decided it was time to step in.
Primo Fertility Day, la prima giornata nazionale di sensibilizzazione e informazione dedicata alla prevenzione della salute riproduttiva.
They quickly found out that people don't like governments telling them to have more children. Meanwhile, businesses are starting to notice.
Chi di un arapallo, anche caratteristiche sono mancati, non si sono ripresi nel tempo, nel senso che...
By 2020, Italy's birth gap had reached 56%, and every country in Europe except Iceland had more 50-year-olds than newborns. But to find the world's largest birth gap, we need to look elsewhere. South Korea is winning this race to the bottom with a frightening 69% birth gap.
In other news, latest data shows South Korea's total fertility rate fell to a record low last year. Kim Il-sung reports.
South Korea's total fertility rate fell to 0.98 in 2018. The falling fertility rate comes despite the Korean government's efforts to tackle the problem, including subsidized childcare leave, free nurseries, and cash stipends.
With children becoming a thing of the past in South Korea, a new form of parenting has taken over, raising what they're calling the dog child.
These mothers and fathers are willing to spare no expense to give their dog children only the best. Dogs are like their children, except they're a whole lot cheaper.
While in Japan, there's even an organization that lets young people try out being a parent for a day.
家族留学という取り組みを中心に展開をしています。そしてその場でわからないことはどんどん聞いていきます。子供が泣いた時どうするんですかとか、子供が生まれて変わったことって何ですかとか、どうしてこの人と結婚したんですかとか。
Unlike Europe, where people have the shortest working weeks and longest vacations anywhere, people in Korea and Japan are struggling with work-life balance. And that makes having children an extra challenge.
We don't have any role model in a real world. It's really rare to see how children are raised. We are just really worrying about it. We don't have specific image, so the issue is in our mind, I think.
I think in Japan, marry means end of life for the humans.
Japanese work a lot. Like, for example, until like 2 or 3 a.m. I think I'm kind of a woman who wants to pursue the career, but I feel really pessimistic about it because I feel like I should give up my career or my dreams for having children.
Despite the vast differences in culture between Europe and Japan, the world's first signs of ultra-low birth rates emerged in both places at the exact same time, and yet no one has found a connection. It's hard to accept it's just one big coincidence. Red means low birth, black holes mean very low birth. That's pretty bad.
何なんだろうってずっと考えてんだけど、これはね、2年経って分かんないのよ。何だったんだろうって。少子化になる原因って何だったんだろう。
He's been thinking, maybe this reason, maybe this reason, maybe this, but still he doesn't know.
Thanks you, Mo. This didn't happen overnight. The data has been there for decades. What worries me is that for some countries, it may be too late already. Even if the number of babies were to increase, it wouldn't make any difference until they grow up and start working. This feels like a trap, a birth gap trap.
We know you're responsible for the Divorce for Denmark campaign.
Yes. Well, actually, it's Eva Lundgren who is responsible for that campaign. Let me see if she's there right now.
I appreciate it.
But she'll be here in around 15 minutes.
So we'll do it right here?
Yeah, we can do it here.
So what was the inspiration for deciding to make this campaign?
At the time of this campaign, there had been small stories in the serious newspapers, not on front page, but on page 10, 12, 13, that this was a serious issue. It's not a sexy topic, really, but we can make it sexy, so yeah.
Well, you can.
Yeah, I can.
Bevis, du har undfanget et barn, og vind 3 års forbrug af Do It for Denmark.
Why is this happening?
It seems that when my mom was a young mom, her life certainly changed, but not that much. And in our time, it's more like this is a shift in your life that's serious. You have so many things you want to do. You want to educate yourself. You want to find the right partner. You want to have fun. So it seems that the time is never right.
I'm kind of not ready.
Hell no. Hell to the no. I'm not ready to have kids.
I've always thought about having kids. I'm also not in a place where I'm married or pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant. So maybe in a few years that'll be another discussion.
All of my friends are head down into their career. None of them are married and none of them have kids. Everybody's just career driven. So I feel so much pressure from my family and Kenny's family. They're constantly asking us, when are you going to have kids? And just trying to explain to them, I just really want to establish my career first.
I'm still very much focused on getting at a certain place in my career before thinking of, my brain cannot even think about that yet.
I've always wanted to have children. I've always wanted to have children while I was young, but not now.
Do either of you want children?
Yeah, we definitely do. We've talked about it.
Are you ready to adopt now?
Ready to adopt in this particular moment? Right now? Probably not.
Do you want to have kids?
That's the biggest question I've been asking myself, and ever since we got married, I've been constantly debating with myself on whether I want to have kids. Am I just blaming the environment? Honestly, I don't know the answer. Am I going to regret this if I don't have any kids?
I had to go through the motions and emotions of my life, and I think I had to do my career and do the marriage and get to the mental place of it's time.
I don't want to be that mom that misses my child's first steps because I'm away. I want to wait until I can say, I can afford the time off. It's fine.
So when would that be?
That's the crazy thing. I don't know.
And now, birth gaps are coming to America. By 2020, the exact same trend saw 39 states with more 50-year-olds than newborns, with New England leading the way with a 29% birth gap, America is starting to notice
fewer babies born in America last year than at any time since Ronald Reagan. That is what's not. The birth rate is way, way down.
It is. Has it been a surprise to you that low fertility is becoming an issue in the US?
It took a while for us to notice. It took us a little while to catch on, but now that we have, I think people do find it worrying, and justifiably so. There's a lot of economic and public policy reasons that that's going to be a big problem for the US going forward.
You've got more and more older people retiring, being supported by fewer and fewer active people working, who are in turn having ever fewer babies.
Right.
It's an impossible situation.
Right.
The good news for America is that because of immigration, our birth rates stayed high long after everyone else's had fallen, which means that we get a preview in a way that almost no other industrialized country does, which means we can look at those other countries and say, I don't want that. What do we do?
The disturbing trend is that the fertility rate falling below the replacement level. In other words, the workforce becomes too small to support the growing retirees segment. It's a very troubling trend. As you've said before, we've seen it in Japan, Italy, and elsewhere.
Who would have thought we'd open the show with the birth rate falling to the 32-year low?
Having started in Europe and Japan at the exact same time, this trend has spread relentlessly across the entire industrialized world and beyond. Yet the only connection I could find was a common anomaly. When we say replacement rate is when the average woman is having 2 children. Of course, not all women are having 2 children. Some will be having 1, some having 3 and 4, and some, for differing reasons, having none. In very simple terms, if we exclude those having more than 4 children, to get an average of 2 children per woman, those having 3 and 4 should be in balance with those having either 1 child or none. To get an overall birth rate of less than 2, it's a mathematical necessity that those having more than 2 are outnumbered by those having none or 1. The lower birth rates go, the proportion of people having no children or 1 child must get greater and greater. The conundrum was that 1-child families were proving hard to find across all of these countries.
I have a younger brother.
I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger sister.
I have sisters and brothers.
私が2人姉妹で
今兄弟は4人ですね。
I have one sister.
1人兄がいます。
I have a sister and brother.
I have 4 siblings, 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
And when I met those a little older, I got the same response.
You have 2 daughters, is that correct?
Yes, 31 and 33.
Well, I have 3 kids myself.
For myself, I have 2 children, okay, the daughter and son.
My assumption had been that countries with low fertility rates would have many families with only 1 child, and that assumption was held by other people too.
The reason Japan's population is declining, of course, is people are choosing to have smaller families.
But why could I not find these smaller families with only 1 child? Something wasn't right. One of the golden rules of data science is to use the most granular data possible to understand trends. What I needed was an annual measure of childlessness, but it simply didn't exist. The aha moment came when I saw the UN collects data on the number of first-time mothers and the children they then go on to have for many countries. Matching this data with total fertility rate data allowed me to calculate the missing piece in our giant population puzzle. The results connected everything. In Japan in 1974, around half of women were having 2 children, just over 1 in 5 was having 3, a similar number was having 1, and 6% were having 4 or more. Overall, the average Japanese mother was having 2.2 children, and with only 1 person in 20 remaining childless, the overall fertility rate for Japan was 2.1 children per woman. But somehow, over the next 3 short years, childlessness exploded to reach 1 person in 4. Yet the percentage of mothers having 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more children hadn't changed at all. This wasn't a shift to smaller families. This was simply an explosion in childlessness. Wind the clock forward to 1990, and childlessness in Japan had reached 1 in 3 women, and yet the average children per mother had increased slightly to 2.3. Since 1990, this pattern has been locked in Japan, with almost no change to family structure or the 1 in 3 remaining childless. Even the proportion of mothers having 4 or more children has remained at 6%, exactly the same as 1974. Changes in demographics tend to happen slowly, but in Japan in the summer of 1974, something startling happened. Until 1973, the country was booming and the number of babies was booming. There was a new concept around, the concept of the modern apartment with kitchens, flushing toilets, and entertainment space. Apartment complexes were springing up all across Japan, and with no end in sight to the country's economic renewal, this young generation had little to worry about. But the mood was about to change. In October 1973, the global oil shock sent the country into a frenzy, and the young generation that was just settling into their new modern lifestyle suddenly had to confront sharp price rises in food and commodities and shortages of the basics. And the data shows, precisely 9 months later, across every prefecture in Japan, the number of first-time mothers plummeted and would never recover. Childlessness, for 1/3 of Japanese women, became the societal norm. Japan was hit hard by the oil shock. It was the world's largest importer of oil at the time, and across the entire country, many young people decided it wasn't the time to become parents. And we can see from the data, this delaying of parenthood meant that many never would. Across in Europe, Italy is described by academics as having been the worst hit by the oil shock. Family structure in Italy in 1974 was remarkably similar to Japan. On average, mothers were having 2.3 children. Childlessness was even less in Japan, with only 1 in 30 people having no children, meaning that the overall fertility rate was 2.3 children per woman. Wind the clock forward only 3 years, and we find just like Japan, childlessness exploded from 1 in 30 people to 1 in 5. By 1990, 1 in 3 people in Italy were destined to be childless, and by 2018, childlessness had reached 2 in every 5 Italians. Yet throughout this time, just like Japan, family structure hadn't changed at all. But this story isn't about Japan and Italy. Across the entire industrialized world, where we have data, in recent decades there's been no change in family structure. Across these countries in the late 1980s, the average mother was having 2.4 children. 30 years later, that number is exactly the same. And all of these nations, just like Japan and Italy in the 1970s, have transitioned to become childless nations. Nations where 1/3 or more of people will be childless for life. What is fascinating is how these rapid transformations align with major turmoil. For South Korea, it was the currency crisis of the 1990s that saw childlessness rocket to 45%. For Germany, the fall in birth rates coincided with the 1968 student protests. And while Germany is one of the countries that doesn't provide the data needed to calculate childlessness, we can see they followed the same trend as Italy and Japan. But it's not just these countries. The exact same trend can be seen across Spain, Portugal, Austria, Switzerland, and beyond. For America, and many countries around the world, it was the 2007 financial crisis. Before the crisis, the average mother in the US was having 2.5 children, and only 1 in 7 people were childless. Yet just like other financial crises around the world, within a few short years, childlessness would rocket to reach 1 in 3 people. And yet during the same time, the average number of children per mother in the US increased from 2.5 to 2.6. The 2007 financial meltdown was a global crisis. And just like the US, the transition to childlessness happened in Canada, Malaysia, Netherlands, Costa Rica, Ireland, and beyond. With so many examples of crises around the world triggering high levels of childlessness, and with no example of any society ever recovering, this feels like a trap. A birth gap trap where it becomes a societal norm to start families in their 30s, when for many, it simply won't happen. I'd been searching for the answer to the wrong question. Instead of asking why people are having so few children today, I should have been asking why so few people become parents today. It turns out there is no trend towards smaller families. People who do become parents are just as likely to go on to have 2, 3, 4 or more children as decades ago. It's all about having the first child. With childlessness having exploded so fast during times of uncertainty in so many countries, this doesn't feel like childlessness by choice. This feels like unplanned childlessness.
Hello, my name is Jodie Day and I'm a childless woman. And I'd like to introduce you to my tribe. This tribe has always been amongst us, but what's different about it now are the numbers. 1 in 5 women like me, born in the 1960s, turned 45 without having had children. That's double what it was for our mother's generation. It's up to 1 in 4 as what we consider the more family-oriented cultures like Ireland and Italy, and even macho Australia. Up to 1 in 3 in Germany and Japan. Now, whilst these numbers don't give us any qualitative information about why a woman might not have children, a 2010 meta-analysis by Dutch academic Professor Renske Keizer would suggest that 10% of women who are childless are child-free, having chosen not to become mothers, and 10% are childless for medical reasons, including infertility. So that leaves a whopping 80% of women without children, childless by circumstance, with those circumstances varying widely, but often featuring the absence of a willing or suitable partner during our fertile years, or even an unsuitable partner. If you'd heard the heartbreaking stories I'd heard.
So a big reason why we're seeing more and more infertility these days is because of delayed childbearing. As women's eggs get older, it just gets harder to get pregnant. Imagine that these are eggs, okay? And this is a 20-year-old. So when a 20-year-old comes in and we do an ultrasound and we're able to see these 20 follicles, I tell them this is great news. You're 20, you have all these 20 eggs and this is for this month. And next month, you're gonna get another 20 eggs. Except that when a woman is 20, not all her eggs are good. For every 5 eggs that she has, as young as she is, for every 5 eggs that she has, maybe 3 of them are good. Those are the orange ones. And even a 20-year-old, as healthy and as young as a 20-year-old is, 2 of those eggs out of 5 might not be good. This is a 20-year-old. This is a 45-year-old. You see how things have changed between 20 and 45. Now, 45-year-olds still have good eggs, but these are hard to find. It's how nature does its job.
Even though there are some amazing technologies today like egg freezing or embryo freezing to help women delay this childbearing time in their life, I don't think that either the media or what you hear from other people always really explains the depths of how much struggle there really could be.
Generally, this treatment required several cycles, several trials, and as a doctor, it's hard to describe how I'm feeling, just seeing those patients who have to give up that treatment after having a hard time mentally, physically. Actually, fertility treatment is very hard.
So giving up must be horrendous for men and women.
Yes.
When a celebrity conceives late in life, reproductive life, we probably know it's an egg donor, or it's possible that she froze embryos a long time ago. It's definitely a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, a miseducation of the public.
I literally wake up every single morning. I'm gonna get emotional and I bless my children because I just feel very, very fortunate that I was able to have them.
I'm someone who married at 37 and had always thought I would have kids, and then it turned out I wasn't going to. And I think it can be a tremendous source of unhappiness.
For me, it wasn't a decision. I don't remember a time when I said, okay, I'm not going to have a family.
It would have helped if I'd known it was grief, or if the doctors and therapists I consulted about my life-wrecking distress had known, but they didn't. Grief is a language that this lost tribe speaks fluently.
Yo pensaba que tenía tiempo, que mi década entre los 30 y los 40 iban a ser suficientes como para que yo pudiera desarrollar mi actividad profesional y después tenía tiempo para ser madre. Y bueno, hice mal los cálculos, postergué porque creí que tenía tiempo.
Did you want to have children?
Sim. Gostaria de ter tido um filho há 5 anos atrás. Gostaria. Mas não aconteceu. Mas gostaria sim. Gostaria de ter tido antes. De poder ter tido filho antes.
20代の頃にもっとデートをしてもっといい人を見つけてもっと子供を作るように努力すればよかったと思ってます。
I think if you caught me at the right day in my 20s when I was very in love or excited about a partner, I would say yes. But if you were to pry into that, I might say, oh no, that seems crazy to have a kid in my 20s.
Llegó un momento en mi vida que a lo mejor sí quise de verdad intentarlo nuevamente, pero era muy tarde, too late.
I just want to get synchronized with my husband, whether our plan, our saying is still on the same page.
Has he answered you yet?
He did not, actually.
Do you want to ask now?
Yeah, yes. We plan to have children for the fact.